Okay, I'm going to do a few different things, different types of things today. First of all, I just want to draw your attention to a word which is very commonly rendered in a particular way, but I don't think it's correct. Take a look at page 33. I mean, we've done this before, but so your translator here did something very subtle. At the very top of the page, 17. Behold, I'm about to bring the flood waters. In Hebrew, it's Mabul Mayim. Now, now take a look at the bottom of the page, verse 6. Noach was 600 years old when the flood was water upon the earth. There, you can't put it together and say flood waters because there was is in the Hebrew is in between the two words. And here, the reader says, well, what are you telling me? What are you telling me that I didn't know? The flood was water upon the earth? What else could a flood be? Why bother saying it? The top of the page, there's no was in between. Is it really a hyphenated single phrase, floodwaters? Not really. But at the bottom of the page, it sounds like the 11-year-old is going to say, why is this holy text telling me something that every 6-year-old knows? That a flood is water on the earth. And then, when Hashem promises that there won't be any more, look on page 43. Look at verse 11 at the top of the page. I will confirm my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood destroy the earth. Why is it one of them is waters of the flood and the other one is flood without saying waters? Especially since the flood, you know, by definition is waters. And I'll tell you a secret that only sophisticated Hebrew speakers know. The word in Hebrew, mabul, does not mean flood. It doesn't. It's not etymologically related to water in any way. Mabul comes from a word, a root, Beis Lamed, which when the Lamed is doubled, which often happens in Hebrew words, balal, it means to entropize. Okay, I made that up. It means to increase entropy by increasing disorder, breaking things up, disordering them, mixing them, smashing them. It's a destructive force. The word mabul doesn't tell you what kind of destructive force it is. So when the Torah says the mabul was water on the earth, it's telling you something. Because the sophisticated Hebrew reader hears mabul, okay, something destructive. What was it? Hurricane, or tornado, or an earthquake, or volcanic explosion, or something else. Oh, what's waters on the earth?
Sorry? Even in English, a flood doesn't need to be water.
Really?
flood of people came in.
Well, I think that's poetry.
All the people were flooding in.
I think that's poetry. That's a borrowed usage. It means like a flood, and flood is water. I think the word flood, if you look it up in the English dictionary, you'll see that flood is in English is tied to water. But this word isn't tied to that. So it comes out here on this in this verse 11 that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is making a double promise. Number one, there won't be destructive water, and number two, there won't be any general destruction, even without water. Now it's not redundant at all. It's telling you two different things. There won't be a repeat of this particular destruction, nor will there be any other general destruction of the earth. And the lesson I want to suggest to you from this particular case is be cautious about dictionaries. First of all, dictionaries are made by people, and people have failures. They have failures of understanding, or failures of attention, or failures of thinking things through. And second of all, they can have agendas. And this applies to every dictionary everywhere. In the Oxford English Dictionary, to inspect means to observe carefully. But that would mean that there couldn't be any such thing as a careless inspection. And there are careless inspections, as you know very well. So to say that inspection is just to miss out one of the implications and not get it quite right. It's not saying it, appropriately. Here's another one, Nachal. Does anybody here have any Hebrew vocabulary?
Yeah. River.
River, right. So then you find a verse that says, the servants of Isaac dug in the Nachal and found water. Oh yeah? They dug in the river and they found water? Congratulations. Why don't you just take a bucket and take some out, right? The word Nachal does not mean river. It means riverbed, like a wadi, which in this country can be dry 99 days out of 100. When there's rain in the hills, sometimes tremendous rush of water comes down the wadi and then it's dry. So there also, the word is translated in really an incorrect way. Yam, sea. But there's a verse that says the waters were covering the yam. Covering the yam. Often the word yam means seabed, not the sea, not the water of the sea. So you have to be very cautious about dictionaries and about translations. And the one that I think is a very injurious example is the word shalom. Shalom is often translated as peace. But if you think of the semantics of the word, they're almost opposites. Peace is a negative word. It means no disturbance. Tranquility means no disturbance. You can say in English, the graveyard is very peaceful. It is very peaceful. You can't say that there's shalom in the graveyard. Absolutely not. Shalom comes from a root shalem, which means to be complete. Complete, and sometimes it's used to translate the English word perfect. It indicates something that's integrated, healthy, functional. You can't say that about a graveyard. We'd never say shalom about a graveyard. So the idea of translation has to be taken with great care. Okay, that's one thing that I wanted to tell you. Now, I mentioned this to you, but I want to look at it more in detail. Again, we're on page 43, right? Yeah. So at the very bottom of the page, it says, Noach, the man of the earth, debased himself and planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk. And now, I think the next translation is incorrect. And was uncovered in his tent. He didn't uncover himself. He was drunk. But he behaved in incoherent ways, and he ended up uncovered. Now, for a man who was described as righteous and whole and pure and walking with God, even though walking with God we saw has two sides to it, but still, it's certainly very good, to end up drunk is really a gigantic Gigantic surprise. I don't think if it hadn't been written, you would never predict that for him. And there's a Zohar about it, which I will tell you in a little while. I want to point out something else. Right here on this page 43, just go up a few lines. I read this to you, but I didn't emphasize it. The sons of Noach who came out from the ark were Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Cham being the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noach, and from these three, the whole world was spread out. What does that mean? That means that the human population after the flood goes back to these three. Yeah. That means after the flood, these three repopulate the world. What about Noach? He's still alive. His wife is also alive.
It's his descendants.
I'm sorry?
It's his descendants.
Yes, it's his indirect descendants. It's his grandchildren. But let's see now. How long did Noach live after the flood? Take a look on page 45. Verse 28, the middle of the page. Noach lived after the flood 350 years. Golly, that's enough time to, produce children. But it didn't happen. So something is going on here. Something's going on here. Yeah.
He implied that Ham, when he uncovered his father, then he castrated Noah.
Okay, that's all in the oral tradition, which can be an explanation. I'm looking for now what you can get out of the text. Okay, now I want to show you something which I saw in the Pri Tzaddik, and it shows you how it pays to pay attention even to the things that are typically regarded as very boring. We saw this before, but I want to point it out again. On page 25, these were the generations. And I pointed out to you that each generation gets 3 verses. Let's start with verse 6 towards the top. The first verse tells you how old a particular person was when he had his child. You thought of the first child. Shez lived 105 years and we got Enosh. Second, Shez lived 807 years after begetting Enosh, got sons and daughters. So that was only the beginning. But after that, he lived so and so many more years, got sons and daughters. And then the third in the trio is to sum up all the days of his life, and just add the two together, 912 years, and he died. Okay, now, I want to contrast that with the same type of text listing generations at the end of Parshas Noach. And you'll see that it's not exactly the same. There's an important difference. Take a look on page 51. So let's start with verse 12. Arpachshad lived 35 years when we got Shelah. Okay, that's the same as the first verse on page 25. How old was he when he had his first descendant? Second, Arpachshad lived 403 years after begetting Shelah, and begot sons and daughters. Yep, that's the same as the second one in the trio on page 25. But there's no third verse. There's no third verse at all. Doesn't sum up his years and say he died. Why would that be? Why would the style cut off the third verse in all these generations? They're all the same. The one explanation is because before the flood, the sons and daughters that they had, almost every last one of them comes to a dead end. They're cut off in the flood, and all the descendants are cut off in the flood. So there's an ending to those generations. Here on page 51, which is after the flood, there's no ending to those generations. They just keep rolling on. Could be an end to a particular family, but this repopulates the world in a way that's remained repopulated till this moment. Okay, so you have one style of recording the great man before the flood with 3 verses, and another style for people who die after the flood with 2 verses. Now the question will be, what style does Noach get when he dies? Noach, who lived 350 years after the flood, what style of summing up does he get? Well, let's go back to 45. Verse 28. Noach lived after the flood 350 years, and it doesn't say that he had sons and daughters, does it? Just says he lived that many years. And then, and all the days of Noach were 950 years, and he died. Which style is that? Pre-flood or post-flood?
Pre-flood.
That's the pre-flood style. It has the 3rd verse that sums up all of his years and says that he died. So Noach, even though he lived 350 years after the flood, gets a pre-flood formula for his death. Well, that requires thinking, doesn't it? Maybe in a certain sense, he didn't really survive the flood. Maybe he didn't really survive. Maybe he's a pre-flood figure. After the flood, he's not really there. He has no children, and he gets a pre-flood designation, and he's drunk. When a person gets drunk, typically the reason is because he wants to tune out. He wants to escape from something. Particularly, he wants to escape something that's very painful. So first of all, he dulls his consciousness, and if he's really successful, he ends up unconscious entirely. So there's something missing here that in the last 350 years of his life. Now I'll tell you what the Zohar says. What does it mean that he got drunk? The Zohar says that after he came out from the this I really heard the essence of this from my Rabbi Zatzal. And I found that it was a Zohar. He came out and he saw the destruction, and he was utterly disoriented. As a point of comparison, I suppose you know that after the Second World War, there were Jews who had fled Europe, went back to Germany. They went back to Germany. How could a Jew go back to Germany after the Holocaust? Because these were older Jews for whom German was their native language, and German culture was the culture that they identified with. They weren't religious. I don't know, and to live in Cincinnati, you just didn't do it, You have the stroll in the park in the afternoon, and Sunday afternoon, and the band is playing in the park, and they're reading German poetry. They were totally disoriented. They call it DP camps, the displaced person. Displaced really means I don't have a place. Okay, there's a tent to sleep in, but for me, it's not a place. So that's the way he felt, but there was no place to go back to. It was gone, number one. Number two, Zohar says that when he came out, he started entreating God for mercy. What we call the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim, the 13 attributes of mercy. He started to say that and asking for God's mercy. God responded to him. Where were you when I needed you? Why did I tell you that a flood was coming? Because I wanted you to do what Moses did. When I told Moses that I was going to destroy the Jewish people after the golden calf, Moses said, you destroy them, blot me out of your book. I don't want to live. I don't want existence. He put himself on the line for them. That's why I told the tzaddik. I told the tzaddik because I wanted him to put himself on the line. I told you, you just took it. You're the boss. You're running the show. If you want to destroy them, it's okay with me. That's not why I told you. So he was confronted with the fact that he failed at his mission. Now look how that Zohar is based on the text. We said that he walked with God. He was like Hanoch, who couldn't function independently. He couldn't step aside. We said he's not like Abraham, who could climb the tree on his own and go out and work for something that's necessary. He had to be protected. We spoke about the Rashi. Why did Kodesh Baruch Hu command him to make the big box? Because people will ask him, and then he'll tell. But he didn't volunteer to go and talk to them. He didn't volunteer to daven for them either. So he, number one, had nothing to go back to, and number two, he failed at a very crucial challenge that he had, and he couldn't live with it. He couldn't live with it. So this is how the text, with these seemingly little insignificant details, if you put them together, you get a picture of someone who was faced by a challenge and who failed to accomplish it. He built the ark, he took the animals in, and he cared for them the whole time. Yes, he did that. He was commanded to do that, and he did that. But there was more that was being asked of him, and he didn't succeed in doing it. So that's a little bit about the idea of his becoming drunk. By the way, I think the translator was misled. The Hebrew word is vayisgal, which can mean to become uncovered. In the Aramaic translation, it has what's called a hispa'el form. The hispa'el form is usually reflexive. It's something you do to yourself. But the hispa'el can be a passive also. And since the verb in the text is not reflexive, I think that they were misled by that, and that's why they said it the way they said it. Okay, are we together so far?
Yeah.
Okay, now, yeah.
Quick question. Is it a point of translation? Sometimes with water, they use singular form, and sometimes plural form. Like flood with waters or with water. Like what's? But in Hebrew, there's only word mime. I don't get why. Why do they?
I didn't notice that. I often don't pay that much close attention to the English, because I'm thinking in terms of the Hebrew. But let's take a look here now. Here it says flood waters. I don't think there's any reason for it. I think it's just it sounds better in English. I think often the text has a care for the attitude of the English reader and makes it poetic in certain ways. Uses words that often are not part of English vocabulary at all. I have to go look them up to figure out what they are. I think it's right for you to ask. Yeah, you had another question?
No, that's all.
Oh, okay. Now, the truth is that Noach is mentioned earlier. I didn't share this with you. He mentioned a little before the beginning of the Parshas Noach. If you take a look on page 27, these are the generations. So, look, verse 28 at the top of the page. Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son. A son. That's not what it says in the other verses. The other verse just tells you who he is. And he called his name Noach. It's the only one where it tells you who gave the name. And he didn't just give him the name, he gave it a meaning. This one will bring us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, from the ground which Hashem has cursed. Now, you're thinking of him as being responsible for the flood. Now, Noach is the root nun ches does connote, among other things, resting. Nach means to be without motion. So now, how did he know this? If he's just born, he's giving a name, how did he know this? The text doesn't tell us. Sometimes people have signs of something that's going to happen. But the oral tradition says that when he was born, this curse that God said that the earth shall bring forth thorns and thistles. When you sow wheat, you'll get wheat all right, but it'll be covered in thorns and thistles. Stopped. That curse stopped. That's very important. That plays a role in the whole understanding of what a curse is. Right? So, well, look at that. He's born, and it stopped. And then it says, Lamech lived 900 years, and he died. When Noach was 500 years old, I'm sorry, he had. Yeah. Okay. So let's go through this. What I want is on the next page. So that's how Noah came into existence, and he came into existence with a certain blessing that accompanied him. Now, in chapter 6, it came to pass when man began to increase upon the ground, the daughters of men were born to them. Sons of the rulers saw the daughters of man were good, and they took themselves wives from whoever they chose. So you had a hierarchy in the human population. The ones who were enforcing their will upon the others, a kind of nobility. And Hashem said, my spirit shall not contend evermore concerning man, since he's by flesh. His days shall be about 120 years. Meaning this wanton behavior of the rulers victimizing the rest of the population was something that God rejected. And 120 years here means for the human class. It's not talking about each person's lifetime should be 120 years. From this time until the flood was 120 years. Nephilim were on the yards, sons of rulers with the daughters of men were bare to them. They were the mighty of old. Hashem saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth. Every product of the thoughts of his heart was but the evil always. Hashem reconsidered having made man on the earth. This all needs a lot of work. I'm just giving this as background. And his heart felt, well, sad, this is not quite right either. Hashem said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the ground, from man to animal, creeping things, and to birds of the sky, for I have reconsidered by having made them. But Noach found grace in the eyes of Hashem. So the decree that they're not worth continuing to live didn't apply to Noach, and the way in which it's described, why not, is because he found grace. Now, if you look in the Hebrew, you'll see something very interesting. Look at the Hebrew side, the fourth line, the bottom line. After the two dots, V'Noach Motza, Noach found Chen. The word for grace is Chen. What are those two letters? Noach backwards. Yeah. So, one of the things you're getting here is, it isn't as if, and he knows that Noach had, smooth blonde hair. Or he had a very coordinated fastball pitch. He's talking about something that's essential to him. It's built into his name. There's something in him that caused him to be singled out by Kodesh Baruch Hu, and to merit being the continuation of the human race. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about Chen. Chen, I think, is the tip of an iceberg, and I can take you maybe 10% of the way down the iceberg. There's something really extremely important here. Grace is the way they translate it here. Sometimes it's translated as charm.
Favor.
I'm sorry?
Sometimes they translate it as favor too. Like when Esther Malka found favor in
Oh, that's the English translation. Gee, I didn't even think of that. Of course she's good. I don't think that.
It's a grace.
Well, maybe. Yeah. I mean, okay, I accept that. Yes, it does say found favor. That's correct. It does say that in the English. Not sure what favor means, but okay. Part of the concept here is this. It's something which you look at, you're affected by, you feel positively about, but it's very difficult to put into words. When you say that someone's charming, usually it's a response that you have to the person, but if you would have to pin down exactly what the person does to generate that description, it would be very difficult. We know what kind means, we know what attractive means, we know what pleasant means, we know what supportive means, but charming, though we can sort of, it's like, describe to me the taste of strawberry. All you can do is hand me one. Tastes are things we don't have words for. And here, charm is like, it's a reaction and you find yourself positively drawn to the person, but it's very difficult to say exactly why. Not the person's kindness, not necessarily the person's beauty. It's something that's hard to describe. We have a word for this sort of thing in English, and that's intuition. I think intuition has gotten an unfortunately bad name. How do you know? How do I know? I just know. Remember the famous Supreme Court justice when they wanted to make a law against obscenity, pornography? And they asked him, how do you define it? He says, I know it when I see it. Okay, that's great. But on the other hand, I think other people know it when they see it also. Without a verbal definition. There's certain things that you learn to recognize because they create in you a certain reaction. Now, what's the status of intuition? So it gets a bad name because people who say, I know, and they can't give a reason, and they say, I just know, we think that they're fooling themselves. If you don't have a reason, then you don't really know. You're just guessing, or you're just expressing a prejudice, and so forth and so on. I think that is in some measure a mistake. I think you can know things through intuition, really know them. So let me give you a couple of examples. First, as an example, which a friend of mine told me, he was working for the Pi Physics Laboratory at Johns Hopkins University, where they make bombs and missiles and satellites that shoot rays and all sorts of things for the military. And I guess they do some civilian stuff also. And he told me, this was back in the 70s when I was teaching at the Arts and Sciences, that they had a problem. Submarines orient themselves in the ocean by using sonar. They send out sonar waves, and then they get the reflection of the sonar waves, and they get a picture of what's around them. And certain schools of fish look like enemy submarines. Well, you don't want to waste your torpedoes on fish. So, it's inconvenient that the sonar tells you there's a submarine there when it's really fish. There were two guys in the Navy who could consistently determine from the sonar picture whether it was a submarine or fish. And then one died. And he got one left. So you think, well, just ask him what he sees. They thought of that. The Navy actually thought of that. And when they asked him, he said, well, you see, the fish look like fish. And the submarine looks like a submarine. That's the way it looks. He couldn't say in words what he was seeing, but you could test him because you know what the sonar is pointed at. You could see it from outside. And you test him and he gets it right every time. So he's definitely picking up on a reality. It's just that he couldn't say in words what the reality was. There are mathematicians who regularly turn out proofs of new theorems. Then there's the rest of us, where maybe you understand the theorem, but prove it? Come on, you're kidding? Let me get a cup of coffee. It's just beyond our ability altogether. How do they do this? How do those people become successful mathematicians and regularly turn it out? Is there a secret book of instructions somewhere? how to prove things in mathematics, and they have a cult where they keep copies of this secret from all the rest of humanity, and they peek in the book, and then they prove something, and then they get paid for it? No, there can't be such a book. It was proven impossible for there to be instructions for doing something like that by the most famous theorem in mathematical logic of the 20th century, Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which I wrote my PhD thesis on. So I'm just telling you, it's an impossibility. Some people see it. They look at mathematical structures and they see a theme, they see a way forward, they see some combinations that could work, and then they work it hard enough to be able to explain it and communicate it to others, and they turn out proofs. If you ask him, how are you doing it? All he can say is, I think about it, that this is what happens. So, but it's definitely knowledge, because when he produces the proof, everybody else sees that the proof is good. It's a valid proof, and it establishes the conclusion. So there are many things that people know through intuition. Let's take psychologists. I don't think anybody is taught to be a psychologist. I think some have the ability of understanding other people don't. And then psychology teaches them extra tricks or extra strategies. But I don't think you can teach someone this sensitivity if they don't have it on their own. So you look at a person, and to you he looks down. Definitely looks down. You say to somebody, you see George, well, what's with him? Well, he has a combination of insecurity and worry. And he's really insecure about being worried. How do you know that? My gosh, I see he's down, but I couldn't give you a description like that. And the other person says, well, I see it. Oh, yeah, you see it, hey? Maybe it's just your prejudice. The person says, well, when I talk to people who look like that, that's what I get. And when I try a strategy for improving that state of mind, most often it works. So I know from experience that what I see is correct, even though I can't tell you in words. But that's what it is. Or take a wine taster. You give him a sip of wine, he says, Beaujolais from 1943, the northwest corner of the vineyard. Really? I don't know. To me, it tastes like wine. Well, he tastes things in the wine that you don't taste. And you can test it. You look at the label and see where it came from and give it to him, and he'll give you what's on the label without looking at the label. So there are many, many things we know about the world that we can't put into words. Chen is a kind of thing which can't be put into words. It's very striking for this to say that he found chen in God's eyes. What does that mean? That God can't put it into words? Maybe yes. Maybe yes. Because words are a tool for describing the world, and they have limits. Not everything in the world has words. It's not as if God can't think of the words or has got limited literary ability. That's why you heard the famous statement, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And what it really means is there's no limit up to the number of words, because you'll never be able to capture in all your words the picture. You can say whatever you want about it, that's not going to give a person the actual appearance of the picture. So there are things which are captured in pictures and aren't captured in words. And by the way, just as a footnote on a footnote, when I was in graduate school, one of my professors said, and the opposite is true also. There are things that are captured in words. They can't be captured in pictures. Draw a picture of the temperature is 20 degrees centigrade, using no words. Try it. Think about how you would do it.
Draw a sweaty person.
Yeah, you just have to use pictures to introduce symbols of words. Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it. So we live in a world. The world has all sorts of facts, information. We have a variety of ways of dealing with those facts and information, and each way gives you access to a certain aspect of the world, and the different ways give you typically different ways to get different aspects of the world, and each one has its place in your ability to interact with the world and understand it. Chen is something where you're reacting to something real, because typically people who have charm or grace or find favor, it will be something which people agree on. It isn't as if it's just random. Sometimes this person will find, sometimes that person will find, there'll be lots of disagreement about it. But when they say charming, what they're saying is, I have a certain reaction, and I can't tell you what it is, and I can't describe it can't describe what's in the person in any more descriptive words. So here it means that Noach had a certain essence which goes beyond just the descriptive power of words. And that means that on the next page, when it says that he was tzaddik and tomim, he was righteous and he was pure or complete, right? Those words only capture one part of what he is. There's more to him than that. And his ability to be the continuation of humanity is something which outruns the description you have in the next page. And now I want to confirm that for you, going back to the verses we read before, but we didn't talk about this before, back on 31. Again, the top of the page, 9. These are the offspring or the products of Noach. Here, Noach was righteous, perfect or pure or complete in his generations, walked with God. Okay. Now, just 1 second. Look at on the next page, 33, chapter 7, verse 1. Shem said to Noach, come to the ark, you and your household, for it is you that I have seen to be righteous before me in this generation. Well, yes, that's true. He did see that he was righteous, but the verse on the previous page said 3 things, not 1. It said he was righteous. He said that he was what the text calls perfect. It says that he walked with God. And over here it only says that he sees that he's righteous. So the tradition comments, when you're speaking to a person and speaking of his great qualities to his face, you don't say everything. When you're praising a person to his face, you don't say all of his praises, because you don't want to trip him up with pride, which is a terrible failure, or for what. So you don't do that. I think that's comparing 33 or 31. I think it goes back to the previous as well. After all, when God announces that he's going to destroy everything on the earth, it says, but Noach found favor in God's eyes. He found charm in God's eyes, or grace in God's eyes. So there, it's telling you that was a factor also. So it means that righteous and so-called perfect and walking with God are factors, but there's some factor that goes beyond the ability to be expressed in words also. And that means that when we think about other people, or we think about ourselves and evaluate ourselves, we must sort of expand our vision beyond just that which can be described in words. Here's another thing you say about people. This person, when he comes into the room, he has presence. What does that mean? Go try to give that a literal description. It means when he comes into the room, things change. People's whole interactions and expectations and reactions change because he's there. How do they change? What kind of quality change is it? What causes it? I don't know. It's not the same. When other people come in, it's another person in the room. When he comes in, things are different. So there are these qualities which are really very important. And the fact that they escape language can sometimes blind us to their importance. You want to say something?
Yeah, Rabbi, I have a question. We discussed 3 points. Noah was righteous. His descendants were actually the one that started the populating, and he had something beyond control. They do not match up. If he was so righteous, and even so righteous, God actually blessed after the flood for him to multiply and feed the earth. Why he had no descendants? And he was from previous generation. Just start with his children. Like, why do you save Noah if he has no purpose? Speak directly to his children and start the world again with them. Why Noah was needed to be brought to the next world if he did not produce anything with his great qualities?
Well, let's see if I can. First of all, it sounds like you're drawing a picture where either you're on the top or you're on the bottom. And you're not leaving room in the middle for someone who has good qualities, but has weaknesses as well. We mentioned when we said that righteous and perfect in his generations is a tension. And we had 2 ways of explaining it. And we asked why anybody would opt for an explanation which reduces his praise. And we said because there were weaknesses. But the fact that there are weaknesses just means the person is not perfect. It doesn't mean that he's worthless and has no value whatsoever. And it doesn't even prevent him from being better than everybody else in the generation. Even the one who takes righteous and perfect in his generations and pulls it down still says that he was outstanding in his generation. So it can mean that he's the top of the group. And indeed, we don't know anything about the 3 children. We just know that they're his children. All God says here is, I've seen you, that you are righteous in the generation. That's why I'm saving you. And that saving you includes the 3 children who are his family and the 4 women who are their wives. So it seems like he's the core of the saving. But now, there are 2 things. In other words, being saved from the flood, that there should be a continuation, and then whether you participate in the continuation yourself. Your merit can be something which stands for you, but then you deteriorate to the point where you can't continue it. But your past history gives you a certain status. That's what it seems like happened with him. After he comes out from the ark, there's that interaction that you mentioned with his children, which is a terrible interaction, and he makes some pronouncements about one of his children and their descendants, but that's it. After that, he doesn't do anything.
But why would God bless Noah? Because it was written, God bless Noah and his children, be fruitful and multiply. And you pointed out he had no children. So is it like empty bracha from God?
That's a nice question. That's a nice question. That is a very nice question. Let me see. I did not think of that question. That's a very, very nice question. Let me see if Rashi says anything here. This is, yeah. I don't think Rashi says anything here. Down, 1 second. Base. No. Okay, so in verse 7 he says, like I said, I told you, the first statement, be fruitful and multiply, is a blessing. At the end of the paragraph in verse 7, it's a command. That, he says, is the pshat, the direct meaning. There's a midrash. Lakish, okay. It's as if you're not involved in that, it's like you're committing murder. Why is it that if he gave him the blessing, it didn't come true? I have to ask some people. Ask my Rebbetzin, ask other people. I think it's a very good question. What happened to this bracha that he didn't fulfill it? In other words, even if you say the midrash that you quoted that his son castrated him, I mean, it was a terrible, terrible thing. But even on that you could ask, but he had a blessing to propose to multiply. How could that happen? You know, how could that interrupt it? So I think the question is good either way. Very nice. Very nice. Good. You know, one of the things that I hope to do with these shiurim is to teach you how to ask questions. This is all of Jewish learning starts that way. It starts with asking questions and understanding Rashi. When you get to the point of studying Rashi, Rashi's comments come to answer questions. Typically, he finds something problematic in the verse, and he will then try to answer it. Rashi's commentary is so fundamental. There are over 100 super commentaries on Rashi's commentary. Very great people wrote commentaries on Rashi's commentary. And a lot of what they do is, what question was Rashi answering? So here, there's definitely a question. I have to think of what to do about it. Anyway, this is the background, and it shows you how a person can be very great and can have tragic elements to his life, and can get himself into a position where he doesn't climb out of it. We don't find anywhere later on that Noach does anything of any, that contributes anything to the world. So one has to sort of keep in line, keep this in mind, keep in mind that one's own future.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
You're very welcome.